This video shows the costs and profits of growing Robusta coffee. It's targeting people who are new to coffee growing, who would want to grow Robusta coffee. It shows the steps from planting to harvesting. It shows step by step and the costs of each process and the overall returns over the years. The content in this video include the common terms used on a coffee farm. We are also going to look at the varieties of Robusta coffee grown and their different yields. We are going to look at the activities involved in the first year of a coffee farm from planting. We are also going to look at the activities involved in the second year of a coffee farm. We are also going to look at the activities involved in the third year of a coffee farm. We are also going to look at the activities involved in the fourth year of a coffee farm. We are going to also look at how to rehabilitate through stumping the coffee garden so that it can remain in production for over 50 years. Most of the people who grow coffee here in Uganda measure land in terms of acres. So what is an acre? An acre is a piece of land which is 4,000 meters squared. It can be, one side can be 100 meters, another side can be 40 meters, giving an area of 4,000 meters squared. Or it can be, one side can be 64 meters, another side can be 64 meters, giving an area of 4,000 meters squared. Or it can be any dimensions, but as long as the area calculated comes to 4,000 meters squared. 2.5 acres make 1 hectare. A hectare is an area which is equivalent to 10,000 meters squared. Normally people compare it to a football pitch, which is 10,000, which is 100 meters by 100 meters. When planting Robusta coffee, the spacing is 3 meters by 3 meters. That is the spacing from one plant to another is 3 meters. You can say 10 feet by 10 feet. It means the same thing. So in practice, this means that the plants within one row are 10 feet from one to the next. And also the space from one row to the next row is also 10 feet, which is also the same as 3 meters. This means that in an acre of Robusta coffee, you are going to have 444 plants of coffee. Normally we round off and we say 450 plants of coffee in an acre. The coffee beans normally have 4 categories at farm level. There is the immature coffee cherries. These are green and not ready for harvest. Then there are the red cherries. These are ripe and ready for harvest. And then we have the chiboko coffee, the dried coffee cherries. These are the dried mature coffee cherries after the coffee is harvested and then dried under the sun. You get what we call chiboko coffee. And then after that, we have what we call the green beans or the kase or the FHU. FHU is the fair average quality. These are the hulled chiboko coffee beans. So once the chiboko coffee is processed in the factory, what you get is the fair average quality FHU. Then off the farm, other processes go on like grading according to different sizes, but we're not going to cover that in this video. The recommended Robusta coffee varieties are from KR1 up to KR10. What does KR mean? KR means Chituza Robusta. So there are lines from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And all those varieties have different yields and different qualities, but all of them are recommended. These varieties are multiplied through clonal propagation. That's why most people call them clones. Others call them cuttings because of the method of multiplication. These varieties were developed by the National Coffee Research Institute, which is based in Mukono at a place called Chituza. That's why the varieties are called KR, Chituza Robusta, because that's the place where they were developed from, and that's why they are KR1, KR2, KR3 up to KR10. Each of the KR varieties has a different yield and different qualities and properties. However, farmers are encouraged to mix all the KR lines, KR1, KR2, KR3 up to KR10, or at least you mix 5 of them. If you only choose to plant one KR line, for example, if you choose to only plant KR1, the challenge you will have is Robusta coffee is cross-pollinating, does not self-pollinate. So if you only have KR lines and the garden flowers, when a bee flies from a flower of one KR1 plant and then flies to a flower of another KR1 plant, there will be no pollination because it's like the bee has flown from a flower of the same plant to the flower of the same plant. Because all of them are clones of the same KR1, there will be no pollination. Therefore, if you plant KR1, you should also include KR3, KR4, KR5, KR6. Like, you choose 5 from the KR10 so that they are mixed, so that you will be sure of pollination and good yields. Don't stick to only one. There are some old clones which were phased out by researchers, much as some of them had very good yields, but some of them were found to be susceptible to coffee wilt disease, which didn't have a cure, and also some were found to be susceptible to leaf rust. Now, those diseases are very dangerous, so they were phased out, though of course some farmers still love them and have them. Yeah, but officially research pulled them out. There were also what are popularly called elite seedlings, which were also phased out. These were produced through seed production, where seed from a coffee farm which is resistant to coffee wilt disease was used to germinate new seedlings, and those seedlings sold to farmers. However, the challenge which was found was that during pollination, the bees came with pollen grains from other plants which are not resistant. So some of the seedlings would not be resistant to coffee wilt disease, and some of the people who receive seedlings, those seedlings would get those diseases. So they were phased out, and only the clones, which are KR1 up to KR10, are recommended for planting Robusta. The biggest advantage of KR varieties, KR1 up to KR10, is because it is resistant. They are resistant to coffee wilt disease. It is important to note that in the 90s, coffee wilt disease almost erased the entire coffee industry in Uganda. So, and it had no cure. So researchers had to develop varieties which have high resistance to that disease, because you don't want a person to invest in coffee, then after like 6 or 7 years, the entire farm, 10 acres or 30 acres, start drying up. That's why we recommend That's why KR varieties which are resistant to coffee wilt disease are recommended. Yes, they have other many advantages. They have high yield, they have good flavors, they have good resistance to other diseases, but the biggest advantage was coffee wilt disease resistance. For estimating the costs and the profits, we are going to use a coffee farm of 1 acre. In the first year, we are going to start with clearing the bush, slashing, and removing the stumps. If you are doing it alone as an individual, it may take you over 90 hours. But if you hire people, it may cost you about 150,000. It can be more or less depending on the areas where you are. Another thing which you need to do is to remove the couch grass. Yeah, it is a weed which should be removed. You do it by using a handhold digging and then picking it out, or you can use herbicides and spray it to remove it from the garden. It is a dangerous weed. Spraying an acre with herbicides can take you about 8 hours if you are doing it individually. If you hire a person, they can charge you 10,000. It can be more or less. The prices of these herbicides keep on changing, but normally they are like 2 liters can be gotten at less than 20,000, but the prices keep on varying. Then we go to the stage of deep plowing that acre of land. If you are to deep plow it yourself, it may take about 150 hours. Yeah, it is some demanding task. Or if you hire people, they can charge about 150,000. And if you to use a tractor in places where tractors are, you can also charge about the same, more or less. And normally a tractor takes less time. Tractor can take 2 hours or 3 hours depending on how old or new the tractor is. Yes, to do the same work. Then we go to the stage of digging the planting holes. You have to start with marking the field so that the planting holes are planted in straight lines. You need to do this so that you are sure that you plant enough plants in an acre and you don't waste land. It is so easy to think that you have an acre, but when the plants which are there and are few. If you are to mark an acre alone, it may take you about 15 hours. But if you are to hire people, they may charge you about 40,000 and they do it for you. Or okay, it may be 50,000 if you include the string, buying the string, but more or less that can be a cost. When it comes to digging the planting holes, you have to make sure that each planting hole is 2 feet deep and 2 feet wide. This is important because it ensures that the plant preserves enough moisture throughout and there's enough room for root growth. Normally, if you don't do it and the dry season is longer than usual, the plants with shallow planting holes can easily dry. Now the coffee plants which have wide enough and deep enough holes have higher chances of survival and going through the dry season in that period, and they grow even more vigorously. If you are to dig the planting holes in an acre yourself, that is about 450 planting holes. It may take you over 100 hours. If you are to hire people, normally they charge different rates, depending. Some can charge 400, like some can charge 500 shillings per planting hole. Others can charge 1,000 shillings per planting hole. So you can expect a charge of between 200,000 to about 400,000 for an acre for people to dig for you the planting hole. When digging the planting hole, ensure that the topsoil is separated from the subsoil. So the topsoil, which is removed first from the hole, is put on the upper side of the planting hole. Then the subsoil, which is removed after, is put on the lower side of the planting hole. We do this because we shall need to put the topsoil back into the planting hole because it contains nutrients and good soil properties. About 1 month to planting, we need to refill the planting holes with soil. So what we do, we have to mix the topsoil with the well decomposed manure. About a basin full is enough. Then you mix it with the topsoil, and then you refill the planting hole with that mixture. Another step is you have to acquire the planting materials. That is, you have to buy the coffee seedlings. In an acre, you need about 450 plantlets, and you have to buy them from a certified coffee nursery. You need to buy the certified varieties, KR1, KR2, KR3, up to KR10. You need to buy from those ones. Normally, the cost, the price varies, but it's normally between 1,500 to 2,000 shillings per plantlet. So you can expect that you get the 450 plantlets. The budget should be around 600,000 to 900,000. Yeah, depending on the price you purchase at. Many times the government supplies free seedlings to farmers, so you may also use that chance and get the free seedlings to plant. After acquiring the seedlings, you need to plant. If you are to do the planting yourself, it may take you about 40 hours when you're doing it as an individual to plant the entire acre, or you may hire people to do it for you, and they may charge about 100,000. It can be more or less. It can even be 50,000, depending on where a person is indeed. After planting your coffee, you're going to meet one recurring cost, and that is weeding. You may weed up to 5 times in the first year alone. It is better when weeding is done when the weeds are still young, before they have started producing seed, before they multiply. If you wait for them to mature, they produce seed, they cause more damage, and they are more expensive to remove, and even they damage the coffee more. When weeding is done when the weeds are still young, it may take you 20 hours to remove those weeds. If you are to hire labor, they may charge about 50,000. It can be more or less, but if one waits for the weeds to mature, it may cost them much more. Weeding regularly when the weeds are still young is usually cheaper. About inorganic fertilizer application, the ideal will be to first test the soil and know which nutrients are lacking, because you may add a nutrient which is already there in the soil and you waste money and adding excess which is not needed. But otherwise, at planting, you can add 60 grams of single superphosphate at each planting hole, or after planting, you can use NPK. You can add it in the first year, but in the next rains after planting, in the next season rains after planting, you can put 75 grams per plant. It can boost vegetative growth and regress growing of the seedling. The price of one bag of 50 kilograms of fertilizer normally ranges between 100,000 to 150,000. The prices keep on changing. However, one bag of 50 kilograms is enough for 1 acre of young coffee. These newly planted coffee in the first year, they don't really need too much fertilizer. After about 6 months from the time of planting coffee, normally the coffee seedlings are about 2 feet tall, or what we can call knee height, your knee height. We do what we call training of coffee or burning of coffee, so that we can have 3 stems from a coffee plant. After planting, you only have 1 stem, but now you want them to become 3 stems or 4, but not more than that. Growing coffee is a business. So the spacing which we recommend, which is 3 meters by 3 meters from one coffee plant to another, for you to be in business, you need to ensure that each stem, each coffee plant has at least 3 stems, but then there should not be more than 4 stems. Otherwise, if you only leave 1 stem and then you space the coffee plants 3 meters by 3 meters, the yields which you'll have will be low and you will struggle to make your farm profitable. However, it is important to note that you should not have more than 4 stems. Actually, 3 are good, but if you have more, you should not have more than 4 stems. Otherwise, you will lose the main target of coffee farming, because in coffee farming we are looking to have as many coffee berries, as many coffee cherries as possible. So we maximize the factors which produce as many coffee cherries as possible. To have maximum production, that is having the highest number of cherries or productivity, you need to balance 3 things optimally. You need to balance the water, you need to balance the nutrients, and you need to balance the light. So if you have too many stems, they will cause a bush and obstruction to light penetration, and then those excess branches will take a lot of water and nutrients, and there will be less cherries formation. So it is very important that you don't over multiply the bushes. The stems, you leave them to 3 or at most 4. Therefore, to multiply the number of stems for a young coffee seedling, which is about 2 feet high, you bend the coffee seedling in the east to west direction at about 45 degrees, and then you peg it down, as you can see in that photo there. The bending of the coffee seedling from east to west, or you can say from sunrise to sunset direction, ensures that the base of the coffee seedling receives maximum sunlight, and this ensures that new suckers emerge at the base of the coffee seedling, and those new suckers are the ones which form the new stems. If you are to do it yourself in an acre, it may take you about 40 hours. But if you are to hire a person to do it for you, it can cost about 50,000. It can be more or less, depending on the availability of people who have knowledge for coffee in that area where you are. The suckers at the base of the bent coffee seedling start growing taller and taller, and when they reach a height of about 30 centimeters, you have to select 3 of the most vigorous looking, so that you can have 3 stems, and then the rest you have to destroy them. You have to cut the rest and you maintain the 3 most healthy ones. If the new suckers are looking more healthy and vigorous than the main seedling which you bent, then you cut the main seedlings and you only maintain the 3 new suckers as the new stems. But if the seedling which you bent, the main seedling, is healthier than some of these suckers, so what you do, you select 2 of the most healthy suckers, and then you destroy the other suckers, and then you remove the peg, and this bent seedling comes back up, so that you remain with 3 stems which are vigorous, including the old one. Let us go to year 2. In year 2, we continue with weed control, and then you also continue with desuckering. You know, the suckers keep on coming, but we already chose and decided that we want 3 or 4 stems. So other new stems which keep on emerging, you have to remove them so that they don't waste our resources. So that continuous activity is done. Then also fertilizer application continues because we want the coffee plant to grow vigorously. In year 3, the same continues, except now you also start harvesting. So we are going to talk more about the costs and details of harvesting. We shall talk about them in year 4. But in year 3, you start doing some harvesting. Another activity which is done is pruning. This is done in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. It's done throughout the production of coffee. And this is the removal of the dead branches, the unproductive branches, the sick ones, the aged ones, the pest infested ones, generally those which are no longer productive, so that you only stay with branches which are contributing to production and which are not distracting light and consuming water, nutrients unnecessarily. Pruning is best done at the end of the main harvest season, and the result of a good pruning is you have better light penetration to more leaves in the plant, and then even the dormant buds access more light, so the dormancy is broken more. There is more flowering, there are more cherries formed, and even the nutrients which are usually wasted on unnecessary branches are reduced. So it increases the production of each tree. Pruning is also one of the best ways of controlling most of the coffee pests and diseases. If you are doing the pruning yourself after the main harvest, pruning an acre will take you over 45 hours. And if normally most people, when they're doing that kind of work, they work for 5 hours a day, so it may take like 9 days. But if you are hiring labor, people may do it for 100,000 or less or more, depending on the areas, to prune that acre after the main harvest. When pruning, we normally use some tools like the pruning saw, which costs about 25,000. Then another tool which is normally used is the secateur, which costs about 20,000. However, after pruning one tree and you're moving to another tree, it is recommended that you clean the pruning saw or secateur with ethanol, which is 75% concentration. Or if you don't have it, you can use jig. You dilute it, the common jig, you dilute it to 25%, and you use it to clean those tools before moving to another tree. And the purpose of this is to minimize the spread of coffee wilt disease, because if you cut one tree and then you go and cut another coffee plant, if the previous tree was infected, you can infect the new plant with coffee wilt disease. Another activity which you're going to continuously do is organic fertilizer application. A lorry can cost you about 150,000 when it is delivered to your farm. The lorry of organic fertilizer, the cost can be higher or less depending on access in that place where your farm is. And also its application in the garden, that application of organic fertilizer, when you are doing it yourself as an individual, to apply it to an acre, it can take you about 40 hours. If you are doing it for 8 hours per day, that can be like 5 days. It can be more or less depending on energy levels. And most people, when you measure most people, when they are doing that kind of hard work. They normally work for 5 hours a day, so it can take you 8 days more or less. But when you hire like people to do it for you, they can be more or less, but it can cost you about 100,000. It can be more or less, yeah, depending. Some people even have permanent workers, permanently on the farm, so it can even be cheaper. Yeah, but it's one cost which a person can put into consideration. Then the inorganic fertilizer application for the coffee trees. The other one we talked about the organic, and now we are talking about the inorganic, the NPKs, and that is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and the likes. Yeah, it's good to use both if you can. For a mature coffee tree, you can apply a quarter a kilogram per tree in a rainy season. That is 250 grams of NPK for a mature coffee plant. There are many suppliers of NPK. There is Grain Pulse, there is Yala, and there are so many suppliers. When applying these 250 grams in a season, it is better to do a split application, that you should not apply all of them at once at the beginning of a season. You can split it into two, like 100 grams or 150 grams. You can apply it at the beginning of the rainy season. Then the other 100 grams, you apply it in the middle of the rainy season, so that you increase the uptake of the nutrients and minimize the leaching. The inorganic fertilizer are simpler to apply. If you are applying them alone, it may take you about 15 hours to do the 1 acre, the 450 plants. Or if you hire labor, it may cost you about 30,000 more or less. As you use the inorganic fertilizers, it is recommended that you also use the organic fertilizers at least once a year. The organic fertilizers help to improve the soil properties and also help to balance the soil pH. Coffee needs pH of around 5.5 to 6.5, but when you use a lot of the inorganic fertilizers, the pH tends to go low and the soil becomes more acidic. When the soils become more acidic, that is, they have a lot of hydrogen ions, and this causes the cells to have a very low cation exchange capacity. What does this mean? It means that the soil particles are holding a lot of hydrogen ions, and because of that, they cannot hold the nutrient ions. For example, they cannot hold the potassium ions, they cannot hold the manganese ions, they cannot, a lot of positively charged nutrients can't be held. So that's why we need to add the organic matter to maintain the soil pH. Others, when the pH is low, some even can use lime, but usually the organic matter is the easiest choice when you have access to it. The main reason why the inorganic fertilizers are very popular is because they are very quick acting. The person gets the results very fast. If you want a specific nutrient is missing, the results are fast. When the inorganic fertilizer is applied, the yields increase very fast, and that's why they are very popular, and they are kind of light, easier to manage and apply. They are easier to store, easier to transport. Yeah, that's why they are very popular. Another activity which is done continuously through the years is desuckering. Desuckering is the removal of the suckers, the new stems. First of all, you determine that you want 3 stems. So a lot of new stems keep coming, and then you have to keep desuckering them, those suckers. Also, some excess branches, you have to keep on, depending on the targets, you have to keep on removing those extra suckers so that the nutrients are efficiently used. The water, the nutrients, and the light can move through the stems and branches, which are essential. And normally desuckering is easier when you have your farm's plan. For example, when you know that after 7 years you will stamp and rehabilitate and then entertain new stems. So because you know the times when you'll need new stems, it's easier to do the decisions of desuckering without having to think about that, will I need this stem or not. Yes, we are going to talk about stamping later on. The suckering is a continuous activity. Normally, the suckers keep on coming up throughout the year. So normally, when farmers are passing through the farms, they do the desuckering. Of course, during rains, the suckers even come faster. Yeah, but overall, we can estimate that in the entire year, the total time put to desuckering in an acre is about 60 hours. But if you are using paid labor and then you look into the bits, maybe 10,000 this time, maybe you paid the person 10,000 another time, it could be up to around 60,000 or 80,000, more or less. The best tool to carry out the desuckering is the secateur. Normally, it's very efficient. Yeah, a farmer needs it. Let us now talk about the harvesting. Normally, coffee has two main harvest seasons in the year. There is the main harvest season, which takes about 2 3 months, and then there is the minor harvest season, which is normally called the fly crop. It takes about 2 months. So in different parts of the country, these seasons come differently. In some parts, the main season is in November, October, December, and that's the main season. And then the fly season is in May, June. Then in some parts of the country, you find that the main season is in March, May, June, July, and then the fly season is the one in November and December. So these vary, but normally there are two: the main season and the fly season. The harvesting of coffee is normally quite long and labor intensive. If you are to do alone, every after 2 weeks you repeat the harvesting, but you can have a cumulative of about 140 hours, like if you are to do it individually. When you keep on hiring people for an acre, it can be up to about 500,000, can be more or less. And then some people have permanent workers where they have different arrangements with them. They pay them per. They have different arrangements of labor. Then others have these people, let me call them, who work per rate. Normally it's the tin. They pay them per a tin of coffee harvested, and normally a tin of red cherries is about 20 kilograms. So some could be paying them 2,000 per tin, others could be paying them more, and others could be paying less. One thing about these wages, they are very surprising. There are big divergences. You move to this area when they are paying so highly, you move to another, they're paying so low, and there isn't a lot of uniformity. But yeah, harvesting is one of those things where you need labor. After harvesting, we have to dry the coffee. So the harvested coffee is carried from the garden and taken to the compounds, where you find tarpaulins which are already laid in the compound, and coffee is spread on those tarpaulins. There are people who construct concrete floors, and the coffee is spread on those concrete floors. Others construct tables, wire mesh tables, and the coffee is dried on those, spread on those tables which have wire meshes on them. Normally, the coffee which is spread on the tarpaulins or concrete floors is normally turned using a rake, so that there is uniform drying of the cherries. And at night, that coffee is normally covered with the tarpaulins to avoid rewetting. Also, when rains come, even if it's during the day, they cover that coffee with tarpaulins to prevent it from rewetting. When coffee is spread on the tarpaulin or concrete, the turning it using a rake helps it to uniformly dry, but also it helps to reduce the chances of mold formation by encouraging uniform drying, and also the covering to in the night to avoid wetting. Those things help to reduce the chances of mold formation, because mold is poisonous in coffee. You don't want it to be formed in the coffee. The process of drying coffee is a bit spread out, but overall the total cost may be about 100,000 if it is hired labor to do it. It's not like a one go 100,000. You keep it something like 5,000 today, 10,000 tomorrow, then another day, something like that. But cumulative, it may be up to that for an acre. After the coffee cherries dry, that is when their moisture content falls to about 14%. Even their color changes from red to black, and they are commonly called chiboko coffee. Farmers normally pack this chiboko coffee in sacks. They call them the 100 kilogram sacks, those big sacks. That's normally where they pack those sacks of chiboko coffee. And normally when you weigh them, they are about 80 kilograms. So each sack is about 80 kilograms. And depending on the management and yields, some farmers can have as many as 40 sacks in an acre. And then there are those who can have as low as 10 sacks in an acre. There are those who have 20 sacks in an acre. But these vary depending on management and yields and varieties. Some can have 30, and there are those who can have as many as 40 sacks in an acre. There are a number of farmers who choose to sell the chiboko coffee at that level, and normally the price is approximately half of the price of FHU. Say if at all the FHU, that is the green beans, if the price is 15,000, then you'll find the price of the chiboko around 7,000. If the price is 12,000 of FHU, you'll find the price of a kilo of chiboko to be around 6,000. There are farmers who decide to add on value. They decide to take their coffee to the factory to process the chiboko coffee to become FHU. So normally we can do a sample calculation. If at all a farmer has 10 kilograms and he takes them to a factory where they buy FHU at 12,000, and when they process the 10 kilograms of chiboko and they find that his outturn is 60%, they find that a farmer has 6 kilograms. So 6 kilograms times the 12,000, you get 72,000. Now, when we compare that to a farmer who sold the chiboko coffee at maybe his farm, this is what you may get. He sold the 10 kilograms at 6,000. So 10 times the 6,000, that is 60,000. So the one who went to the factory got 72,000. The one who sold at home got 6,000. Of course, the one who went to the factory also paid the factory price. Normally, they charge about 100 shillings per kilo processing, and that is 100 times 10 kilo. 100 shillings times the 10 kilograms, that's about 600 shillings. So you realize that it's still the margin of, like, this one got 60,000, the other one got 72,000 minus 600 shillings. It still remains with 71,000, which is significantly higher. When we look at the costs and profits, most of the costs which we have in the first year are fixed costs. That is buying the seedlings, planting, clearing the bush. Most of those are fixed costs. Also, you go into the second year, most of them are fixed costs. But now when we go into like the fourth year, the third year, the fourth year, the fifth year, and so on, we go into what we call the variable costs. These costs which you put in the year, and then you also get the outputs. And now, so for example, if you look at like the fifth year, and you look at the cost of the inputs which we use, say the organic fertilizer in an acre, and then the inorganic fertilizer, and the labor of the people, in case you're not doing it yourself, per acre, the different units we talked about, you realize that your average cost will be about 2 million for 1 acre. And now when we look at the returns, you realize that the price of coffee keeps on changing. Sometimes it's 12,000 a kilogram, other times it's 15,000. But if you use, say, 12,000 a kilogram, the yields keep on varying. For example, if at all in an acre a person has an average yield of 3 kilograms of FHU per tree, that is 1,300 kilograms. And say if at all a person has an average yield of 1.5 kilograms per tree, that is in an acre of FHU, that is about 600 kilograms per acre. So when we put that in terms of money, that's the range between 8 million to 15 million at the price of 12,000. But now we have looked at the cost of 2 million for the variable costs. So let us end this video by talking about coffee rehabilitation through stamping. After planting coffee, and coffee makes about 10 years, the productivity starts to reduce. And if at all a tree has been giving you 3 kilograms of FHU, it starts giving you less and less. So normally after 10 years, you should rehabilitate or stamp the coffee so that the productivity is rejuvenated. And then after that, you repeat the process after 7 years. Basically, in coffee rehabilitation, you cut most of the old stems, and then you leave one stem, which is the breather, so that the coffee stump remains alive. And now new suckers come up so that they create new stems. Usually, this process makes you miss one major season. Let me share an example. If at all your major season happens in November, December, and then after that major season in January, you decide to do the stamping, what that means is that the 12 months up to December, you will have stamped, but then that December season, you won't have harvest for the 2 stems. You only harvest from 1 stem which you had left, which is the breather. So you miss a significant percentage of that harvest. But then the next 12 months will bring you to another season, but by then the young suckers will have been 2 years old, and they will be fruiting and giving very good yields. And the farmers who do that normally on average remain with higher yields, and the yields which they get are actually much more, and they compensate for the other major season which they missed. Also, when stamping, farmers are normally encouraged to do it in phases. For example, if you have 4 acres, this year you can stamp 1 acre, and then you remain with the other 3 in production so that you can survive with. You don't want to affect significantly your cash flow. So that once this one comes up, and then you go to the next the next acre, and then you do it like that in a phased manner so that your cash flow remains mostly stable. I hope this one helps someone to start growing coffee, because it was mostly targeting the new people who are entering the coffee sector. These things may be the old farmers are familiar with most of these things, but new farmers, it may be helpful. Happy regards, happy 2026.